Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to jump on and introduce myself. My name is Will Bruton. I'm a yachting journalist who has now started working with Kraken, and we're hoping to bring more topics onto Ocean Sailor and interview more people and generally produce quite a bit more content. And so I've been working with Dick and also sometimes doing some videos on my own and some interviews. And this is going to be the first of those interviews, which is an answer really to well, an indirect answer to a question from Ocean Sailor. And yeah, I hope you find it really interesting. And any comments or questions that you might have, please put them in the comments below, so that we can help shape some more interesting content for you to view on all things, mostly ocean sailing, but also sailing more generally. And we're looking forward to doing more on this. So one of the questions that we had from a viewer was along the lines of, how do I get into sailing when I've never been on a yacht before, and how do I have an adventure without being able to afford a yacht? Well, I don't think you need a yacht to have an adventure. And immediately the first person that sprung to mind to talk to about this is a gentleman called Roger Barnes, who has written a lot and about adventurous dinghy cruising and about the fun that you can have in a very small boat, and how accessible it can be. And the Dinghy Cruising Association in the UK is the organisation that promotes this, and it's far more active than people realise. And there's a lot of rallies and a lot of regattas, and a lot of people meeting up all over the place with small boats and having a lot of fun, who aren't racing, who are actually using the boats to go to places and access things that other people can't get to because they haven't got a boat. And so Roger, to introduce him, he's the author of the Dinghy Cruising Guide, and it's now in its second edition, I believe.
Yeah, it's called the Dinghy Cruising Companion.
Dinghy Cruising Companion. I'm sorry, Roger.
Yeah, there we are.
But Roger's also, by background, an architect, and he worked both in France and the UK. And he has many different interests. But dinghy cruising is something that he's really well known for. So, without any further ado, welcome Roger to the Ocean Sailor podcast.
Thank you. Very pleased to meet you all.
So I think probably the first question to ask is kind of how you discovered sailing in a dinghy, and how you came to it for the first time.
How did I discover sailing? My parents used to. I was born in the northwest of England, and my parents started renting a little holiday cottage on the shores of Windermere from when I was about 8. And they did this just because we moved away from Cumbria. We moved into Lancashire, and a lot of Lancashire's very flat, and they missed the hills. So they just booked this cottage. And we had a third share of a tiny, tiny little, it was a quarter of a barn, but it was like 50 yards from the lake shore. And after a summer, my parents realized that you couldn't have a little holiday cottage on the shores of a lake without a boat. So we got a boat, and we got a rowing boat, and then we got a sailing dinghy, which was a heron dinghy. So from about that age, I was sailing. My father was taking us out on the lake in this heron dinghy, 12-foot plywood dinghy.
Yeah.
And so that's how I discovered dinghy sailing. And then all sorts of things happened. In my life, I had periods when I predominantly went racing rather than sort of pottering around on a lake with a dinghy, which is what I had done from that young age. But I've sort of gone back to it. There was a period I owned a 30-foot yacht in this house where you're talking to me now, which actually is in northwestern France. I keep my boat, which is 15-foot dinghy, on a trailer in a garage, 2 floors below, and I can sail anywhere within the length of time it probably takes to drive to your yacht and then motor your yacht out to sea. I can go, which is about 2 hours. I can go all sorts of places and have a different experience every weekend. launching and recovering, as long as you know where the slipways are. So you think, well, I'll have a challenging weekend, so I'll sail out to an offshore island like the Ile de Glénan or something, northwest in Brittany. Or I just want a nice sail in sheltered waters, so I'll go somewhere like the Gulf de Morbihan. And when I lived in Britain, a similar thing would be I'd maybe I lived in the southwest of England. I'd maybe sail on the River Dart if I wanted to sail somewhere sheltered and visit nice little villages and waterside pubs. Or I'd go into the Bristol Channel and sail to Lundy if I wanted to do something, really quite dramatic and challenging. Sailing to Lundy is challenging.
I know Lundy.
No
Lundy
marina there. It's just you're just anchoring under a cliff, basically.
And you're very exposed at the wind turns.
You're very exposed. 15-meter tide. Tidal streams run at a good 5 knots.
But I think your point is you can get there in a dinghy.
Point is, I can go there, right? And then I can take you. I can go to Clovelly, which is a lovely little port in the same area. You'd sail into Clovelly in a little dinghy. There is this is in August on a summer weekend. You will not find any other yachts because it's a drying harbour. You'll probably be the only visiting boat. And it's extraordinary. It's just the most extraordinary place. Because it's this little sort of estate village. It's drop dead gorgeous, and it's just there. You can go, you can stay there. You put your boat tent up in the harbour. The local fishermen will come down and talk to you because you're interesting and different, that you've come there in a little dinghy. And the nice thing about turning up somewhere in a little camping dinghy is it's unpretentious and it seems ordinary, and people will talk to you and they don't feel that sort of social diffidence.
Well, I think to shoot straight down the line with it, we're obviously the Ocean Sailor podcast is part of what Kraken Yachts does, and we do produce those boats that are big and are built to go everywhere and anything like that. But I think the reason I wanted to talk to you was because the question that we had was a very legitimate one. I've been a yachting journalist for about 10 years now, and the access to sailing has been, whether it's a perception or whether it's a real thing, has been, I think, getting a little bit harder. I think it could be an issue of perception that's a problem. Sailing got better at it, and they're more open than they ever were. Not entirely, but they are better at it. But I think you could probably put some figures on it. We're not talking about a lot of money, are we, to get into dinghy cruising?
No,
really not. What are we talking about here? To put some.
Well, the thing about dinghy cruising is you're better to buy an old dinghy. So it's got all the equipment. Well, it's just like any. It's just like yachts. You're actually always better to buy a second-hand one, aren't you? That all the equipment's there, as long as whoever sells it you has kept it properly up in trim and it's well found. As compared to a new yacht, you get far more bang for your buck getting an old one. But the other thing about dinghies is that many dinghies are raced, and valuable dinghies tend to be kept up to class, and that's quite expensive. And as soon as a dinghy becomes dated, like you could buy something like a Wayfarer, which is a dinghy that lots of people cruise in. Wayfarers are still raced, but old wooden Wayfarers don't tend to be raced, and an old wooden Wayfarer you can pick up for just a few £100. But it will still be, if someone's looked after it, it'll be a perfectly decent boat. A wooden Wayfarer recently sailed all the way around Great Britain non-stop, just a few years ago. That was an old wooden Wayfarer.
I think I'm right in saying there was one that went to Norway at one point as well.
There, a good while ago, yes, there was. That was Frank Dye, yes, indeed. Yeah, I'm not certain I would sail across the.
No, I'm not. We're not advocating.
I think it's interesting. Norway, but yeah, Frank Dye did. Yes, yeah.
And I think also around the UK, where there's a lot of drying harbours, you are opening up an awful lot, aren't you, with something that can go in a long way and can that's another aspect to it.
So, for instance, if you sail into Salcombe in the southwest of England, there's a the town is sort of quite crowded, and then there's an area, everyone anchors.
Yeah.
But if you carry on up the estuary, there's huge areas beyond the deep water that you can explore in a little dinghy, and there's lots of weirs ending in little pubs and things.
Yeah.
And you can just you will end up anchoring in maybe 3 meters of water, and you'll dry, for half the tide, because there's maybe about 6 meters tidal rain. But you dry out on mud, and you're in this just beautiful open countryside. And you're completely free to do this. This is what I find is extraordinary about this. This is perfectly legal. You can just pick a beautiful view and anchor in the middle of it. And that is a freedom which, if you were to try and do it in a backpacking tent and camp in the fields that you're looking at, the farmer might come and say, "No, what are you doing? This is private property." But because you're on a boat, you can do it. And the wonderful thing is the way that is, it's not sailing around the world. It's not, going around Cape Horn. It's not that level of high adventure, but it is an adventure. It's much more interesting than, sailing to a deep water mooring or picking up a buoy like all the other yachts have. To actually explore further up the river, and you're in a coastal wilderness.
This is what I really wanted to dial in on, because the question, I think, from the person that was watching was about having an adventure. And I'm not sure that the definition of adventure has to be a blue water one. I think it can be the way that you were animated there and talking about it says an awful lot. I'm kind of also interested in, if someone were to come into this with no experience whatsoever, the Dinghy Cruising Association that allows you to do that in company, doesn't it?
We have. What we don't do is take responsibility for other people's boats, because we can't.
I understand.
So when you turn up to our rally, you are your own skipper, and you are responsible for your own boat, which is a sort of normal position under British law. But obviously, the rallies take place in various different sorts of places, and they're normally actually in sheltered waters, or they can be accessed from sheltered waters. So yes, and you can look at be 10 other boats. They're often not a lot of boats. It's still quite familiar, and it's not you're not going to feel intimidated by being among a large group of boats. And so you end up being able to talk to people and sharing experiences and look at how they've got their boats set up. And yes, sometimes rallies are actually based next to shoreside campsites, so you're actually sleeping ashore. So you're just day sailing.
Yeah,
But other times we do have rallies where we sail to a certain little creek. We've got. I should say we do rallies all around the world. We're not just in Britain. We are predominantly still in Britain.
Yeah.
The reason I've just come back from America, I spent a month in America, is our American members wanted me to come and see how they're doing, because there are all sorts of groups now in the northeast of America, and from Maine down to Connecticut. So I was visiting them, and they're doing similar things, that they decide where they'll sail to, and people all sail and arrive at a certain place overnight, and then in the morning they go their separate ways. But the place where you end up at, which if you're going back to the Solent, our south coast region, they have lots of little creeks that they have visited since, for 50 years. They've always been going to the same little creeks that only we know about, because they only really interest dinghies, and they're little drying creeks. And you sometimes are in this little creek with just a little group of dinghies, and you can look across the flats and see all these masts there's one that's quite near Lymington, so you can see all the masts in the marinas of Lymington.
Yeah.
You're just in this little tidal creek, which is an old dock, an old abandoned dock from the time there used to be salt works. in the New Forest.
Yes, I used to live in Livingston. I'm not sure if it's a Dinghy Cruising Association secret. I think I know where you mean.
It's called Oxley Lake. Yeah, no, where we would commonly go there, and you just never see anyone else. I dare say the odd canoeist
And
there, and it is a nature reserve. So you're actually in a nature reserve.
Yeah.
It is just that availability. It's somewhere as populous and popular as the Solent, and yet there are these remote little creeks that you can explore in a dinghy, and you end up, obviously there are dangers to any sort of sailing, but it's not. You're very, very unlikely to come to any great harm cruising in a dinghy, really. As compared to other things you might do. I think it's less dangerous than racing a dinghy. And you're usually very close to rescue, if you needed it. But it does feel very, very, very different to your ordinary life. To actually spend a night just under canvas in a little dinghy at anchor in the dark, just surrounded by nothingness.
Because to sort of explain, a lot of you have got a boom tent, right? So you're in the dinghy.
We're camping in the dinghy. Exactly. Yes, you're sleeping afloat. The reason we do that is that we sail in tidal waters, and so landing and taking, walking up the foreshore with a tent and finding somewhere to camp and taking all your baggage there, and then doing the reverse in the morning and worrying about the boat being secure while the tide goes in or comes out or whatever way round the tide is that night. It's much easier to actually be in the boat. And then and all your gear is then there. You don't need to shift it. Also, I should say, I went on a dinghy cruise in the coast of Maine. This is something called the Main Island Trail. This is in northeastern America. And we were landing on islands because the boats weren't all set up for sleeping aboard. So we were, taking all the gear up the beach. And the big problem was ticks.
Right.
There were just ticks everywhere. And I sort of thought, ticks aren't a big problem where I sail, but they are something you think about, but a huge problem in Maine.
Okay.
And but you don't have any problem with ticks on a boat. It's all this nice thing about just staying on board your boat. You can then go ashore, but at least the sleeping aboard, once you've got it set up, it's just so convenient. And the thing is, you can stop anywhere. It means that you stop worrying about getting to a certain destination, because it doesn't matter what destination you get to in the evening, as long as you get into shelter. So if there's a headwind or indeed too much wind, and your planned destination you decide is too ambitious, you just go in somewhere else, as long as you've got some idea how the coastline works. And it's not like the Bristol Channel. It's not just a line of granite cliffs, but it is somewhere you can, an awful lot of the coastline, there are lots of little inlets that you can take a small boat into. And then the nice thing about that is you find out places that you would never have come across had that not happened to you. And you're not, when I sail yachts, what you tend to do is you have a yacht pilot book and all the anchorages are in it. Pick, one of these anchorages and it'll tell you all about it. In a dinghy, you very often go to places that aren't in the pilot books. That just at some little inlet that maybe you even find on the Ordnance Survey map, because even charts are not detailed enough for little inlets. And the Ordnance Survey map gives you a good indication of where high and low water marks are and things. And so we often do that, pilot your way in, on an OS map.
And if you were someone that was coming to this with absolutely no experience of dinghy sailing, no sailing experience, if they were to go and do a sort of RYA level 1 course, a level 2 course, what sort of, there's probably not a fixed answer to this, but what would they really need to do to be okay to join an event that you do?
I think with they can reading my book, good, because I did go through from beginning to end, and I thought The trouble is, if you've been doing this all your life, lots of things start being second nature, and you
Yes.
sort of think, well, I'm just sailing my boat. I've got it set up to sleep aboard, and I drop the anchor, and there we are. But even saying that, lots of people have never anchored the dinghy,
No, no.
and they
no,
don't
yes.
even know how you would begin to
Yeah.
think about anchoring a dinghy. So there are all sorts of things like that. But the best way to learn is to do it, and to do it somewhere that is basically pretty safe, like on a lake,
Yes.
and just sail down the lake or in sheltered tidal waters, and just decide somewhere, because it only just needs to be round the corner. You're going to spend the night round the corner,
Yeah.
and you'll find out innumerable things about yes, camping in a boat, and just handling a boat, in using a boat in that sort of way. You're
Yeah.
not just pottering around. You're actually using the boat to do something and go somewhere, and that does change a dinghy into something quite different. You start actually treating it a bit more like a yacht, and actually making passage plans and things like that. But a lot of it is common sense.
Yeah.
And there is no real substitute to just experience, just doing it.
Yeah.
The first few times you'll do it, and I can remember when I did it, it does feel very exposed.
Yes.
Suddenly, you are sailing somewhere unknown in your little boat, and just camping out in the wild does feel
It's
very different to your ordinary life with hot showers and toilets and things. There's all sorts of things. What do you do about the toilet? There are answers to all these, but there are various solutions. But you do have to have a solution to all those things.
It seems.
How are you going to cook? What are you going to do if the the wind, your sheltered anchorage suddenly turns into not a sheltered anchorage in the middle of the night? What do you do? Things like that. Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me like an area of dinghy sailing, and a kind of an activity that someone could do that has quite a busy life, who perhaps doesn't
No, exactly.
have
Yes.
time to
Yeah,
go on.
and you absolutely don't think about work. If you go
Yeah.
if you go out sailing in a dinghy for a weekend, you don't think about work at all. There is not time. You're thinking about tides and wind and currents and heaven knows what. Yes, you're certainly not thinking about work. And as soon as you get in somewhere in the evening, you want to sort of get tent up, get something on, cook something. Then you're worn out and you just want to sleep, and then you wake up in the morning and the tide's making or falling or whatever it's doing, and you need to be off at a certain time to catch the tide.
Immersive.
Yes, because your whole life revolves around the wind and tide, doesn't it, when you're sailing? And
Yeah.
very much so in a small boat.
And is there it sounds like the experience of the place that you go to is a really big part of it, and the anchorage that you find, or where you go. Is there anywhere in particular that has really stood out and has really sort of been a particularly mind-blowing kind of place to take a small boat like that?
Oh, funnily enough, I was asked by the RYA this very question 2 weeks ago. They had a symposium, and they were saying, "What's your favourite area around Great Britain?"
Yeah.
And all sorts of people. A lot of the others were yacht sailors, or indeed, actually, there's a woman on a narrowboat, and so they were all. And I did say the Bristol Channel, which I've described going to London, because the Bristol Channel is just extraordinary, but it is very challenging. It's challenging in a yacht. Bristol Channel is challenging, but it is extraordinary. But if I was not to say the Bristol Channel, I'd probably say, obviously, the west coast of Scotland. Done a lot of sailing.
I'm wondering whether you'd go that way, Roger, because yesterday I interviewed a couple who had circumnavigated on their big yacht, and it then took them. They circumnavigated. It then took them 4 years in the Mediterranean, and then they ended up going through the west coast of Scotland to go to Norway. Have decided unequivocally that the west coast of Scotland is the best place in the world.
Could well be, yeah.
And I'm inclined to agree.
It's the mixture of It's the fact that the countryside, it's not just two-dimensionally interesting. There's all sorts of interesting inlets and sea lochs and exposed headlands and offshore islands and goodness knows what. But it's interesting in the third dimension as well, in that these are mountains.
Yes.
And so many interesting coastlines are actually quite low lying. The Breton coast where I live here is quite low lying, but Scotland isn't. There are serious mountains, and that and really interesting wild country, and then little fishing ports and all sorts of things. And you can take it how the nice thing is there are sheltered areas that you can sail in a dinghy, and everything's quite intricate, and you get places quite quickly, like round Crinan. I used to do a lot of sailing around there, Loch Shuna, Loch Craignish. There's lots of little sea lochs with lots of islands. Or you can sail out to the Outer Hebrides, which is really nice and challenging.
Yeah.
Or around Mull or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of up around Skye as well. There's it gets, as you get further north, it tends to get bigger and wilder, does the west coast of Scotland. But further south, on the Firth of Clyde as well, there's lots of interesting places around Cowes of Bute. Around there, you can sail in a dinghy, and they'd be good places to start. Actually, if you were if it was a first escapade in cruising in a dinghy, you could go somewhere like Cowes of Bute and have and maybe rent a cottage ashore and just do day sailing and get a sense of what's needed to do passages in a dinghy. And
I think the other thing that strikes me that people might be a little bit put off by or wondering about is that obviously you've got to tow the dinghy to get there. Is there anything to say on that? And there must be quite a big part of dinghy cruising is, are there any top tips for towing a boat? And
well, that is actually a very good question. The way you have to treat it is, let's say you're going out for the weekend, so you're going to have a night away, which you could. I have done this. I've sailed to Yarmouth on the Isle of Wight and spent the night in a B&B and sailed back in the middle of winter. We decided we'd actually stay in a B&B, and so that meant that we had to get to Yarmouth. We sailed across, I think, probably from Bucklershard, somewhere like that, or actually may have been Keyhaven, the way the tides work. I think it was Keyhaven, but yeah, we did that. So it was a weekend away and a night away. But the point is that your weekend away starts when you leave home towing the boat.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I have a boat that I can rig and get ready and put in the water in quarter of an hour. And that is because it's a very simple rig. It's an unstayed mast and it's one sail, and there's not all sorts of complicated stuff. And people say, it's a lug rig. And people say, well, is it less efficient to windward? And it is less efficient to windward. But the point is that if someone's doing the same thing as me, they're leaving home and driving for a slipway and launching their boat, and they've got a rig that's more complicated to windward, they're going to find it takes longer to rig their boat. They'll have all these high-tensioned, shrouds and things that they've got to tighten up with bottle screws and all sorts of stuff like that. And that's how they get their increased windward efficiency. But I'll still get to the destination quicker than them because my boat was quicker to launch. So you've got to actually think about that, the whole launching and recovering and how it works and how you get the boat on and off the trailer. Yes, you do need to get to work easily, but this can be done. And the sort of people who launch rigid inflatable boats, there's lots of people who have them, and if you Google slipways, the people who have done all the research on slipways tend to be people who own ribs. And they're big. Ribs are big things, but they're typically launched off trailers. And the thing is that people who buy a rib, they buy an expensive trailer, and the boat and the trailer are designed to work together. You buy it as a set from manufacturers of ribs.
Yeah.
The problem is with people who buy dinghies is that we tend to begrudge any money spent on the trailer. And so we buy the cheapest possible trailer, and it's typically slightly overloaded because we haven't bothered to put it on a weighbridge and find out how much our boat weighs, with all the gear on board and things like that. So the springs are a bit overstressed and one gets all sorts of problems. You do have to treat the trailer seriously as a proper road vehicle, and it's worth getting a decent one.
Yeah.
So that is part of the setup.
Yeah.
And yes, you've got to think my rig is the boat and the trailer, and all that has to work together.
And probably a little bit of annual maintenance on the trailer.
Oh, all that, yes. Making sure the wheel bearings aren't going to collapse. We've all had wheel bearings collapse because it tends to stim maintenance of wheel bearings. But my current trailer actually has oil bath. Its wheel bearings have got oil baths in, they're not grease.
Yeah.
And so you can see if they've let water in because there's a little clear cap on them, and you can see if it's gone white. And they're remarkable. So, and it wasn't that much more expensive than trailers, isn't it? That.
But still, all in, we're talking about a very accessible thing here, and that's
that trailer cost. That's I bought. That's French trailers. It was €1,500. So it's not as compared to what you spend on yacht.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Dinghies are that's the thing about a dinghy. If you decide to sail in a dinghy, don't treat it as cheap. Buy the best gear.
Yeah.
But you'll still you go into a chandlery with a dinghy, and you're hard put to spend £100 or €100, and that means you can have decent kit, and make sure you've got a decent set of charts. And I have a chart plotter. A little chart plotter, so things like that. There's no reason not to. And they're almost something like a chart plotter is more vital on a dinghy than it is on a yacht, really, because you're sailing maybe alone. You don't have a cabin to go into, and if it gets dark and cold and you're far from your destination, you really do want to get there. You want to get into shelter, and a chart plotter with you've put in your destination as a waypoint. You know how far away it is. You know what your ETA is, and so it's really adds to your sense of security that you know how long you're going to be on passage, and then you can make a decision. It's too far away. It's 4 hours off. It's going to get dark. Maybe I should head in the other direction. And you can put in another waypoint and go, oh yes, look, I can go there instead. And if you're, as I say, you set up to sleep aboard, you can go in anywhere. But even if you're not set up to sleep on board, as long as you've got into shelter, then you're fine, aren't you? You can ring a taxi or whatever. As long as you can actually get into shelter and get to shore, you're not going to die. That's fine. You solved the problem. And you may have a little adventure in that you haven't got it wherever you've booked to stay in a hotel or something.
Yeah.
But it is that sense that you are that your life isn't completely planned. That is, I think, part beauty for me of dinghy cruising. It's the reason I don't have an engine on my boat. I very rarely carry an outboard. Is that I like the fact happenstance changes the program, and it has to vary depending on the wind and the weather and so on.
Yeah.
Whereas as soon as you have put an outboard on a boat or have an inboard engine, you decide where you're going to get to that evening, and if the wind drops, you turn on the engine, and you just spend half a day motoring or all day motoring.
Sometimes nice.
And that's thinking how you do on land. That's what you do with a car, or But to actually say, all right, then the wind's dropped. Maybe do we really need to get to wherever we planned? Why don't we just have us, just sail less far and spend the afternoon? As there's not going to be any wind, we'll go into a little sheltered creek and spend the afternoon swimming around the boat or lighting a bonfire on the beach or something.
Yeah. Sometimes
you're still allowed to light bonfires on beaches.
I'm sure you get away with it. Yeah. Roger, been absolutely fascinating. It seems like we've got the download on dinghy cruising there. But remind the viewers where can we get the book, the latest edition, and where can people find out more about the Dinghy Cruising Association? What do they?
Well, the Dinghy Cruising Association, just Google us.
Yeah.
We've got a website, a very good website. There's all the information on there. It's not costs, I think, £30 a year to join us. It's not very much. And then you get access to all our rallies. In Britain, we do hundreds of rallies a year.
Really?
I don't actually know the number, but it's,
Wow.
it's extraordinary, Mark, because we have lots of regional groups, and the people in the Solent, who I've mentioned, go to Oxley Lake. They do a rally every 2 weeks in the summer and every month in winter. So they do 30 rallies a year, just in the Solent, and we have other places as well, and then in France and, as I say, North America. So, yeah, we are all over, mostly in English-speaking countries. As to my book, it's published by Bloomsbury, well, by Adlard Coles, but they're part of Bloomsbury. But again, you just sort of Google me and you'll come across it.
You're on YouTube.
A new book. I've got to plug my new book out in November called Sailing the Shallows. So there's the old book, which is still in print and has just been revised. And then there's a new one out in November, which is more sort of a set of stories. The Dinghy Cruising Companion is a how-to book, really, with stories, but it's basically a how-to book. And it's all about using a dinghy for everything other than racing. It's how we define dinghy cruising in the Dinghy Cruising Association. Everything other than racing.
Put a link at the bottom of the video. But you've got a YouTube. You're on YouTube as well, aren't you?
I'm on YouTube. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Again, if you Google me, you'll come across the channel. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's been brilliant, Roger. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think loads of insight there, and it makes me want to go and have an adventure and buy a dinghy, which I haven't done yet, but I probably will do soon.
Well, there you are. Yes. I've spoiled yachting for you forever now.
Well, I don't think they're different things, and I feel like what you're talking about is a world that's out there that's quite close within reach, and that's really
that is its point. And if you've got 2 weeks to spare in the summer, well, you can charter a yacht, which is the sort of thing I do from time to time. A yacht, you can get you can do serious distances, and you do it in relative comfort, as compared to doing the same thing in a dinghy. But for weekends, I think dinghies beat yachts hands down, actually, for the flexibility of being able to go anywhere you want, really. But maybe, for your 2 weeks in the summer, again, I'd still say a dinghy. I took mine just 2 years ago to Venice. Decided I'd tow the boat to Venice. So I spent 3 weeks in the Venetian lagoon, which was extraordinary. To actually be able to take a little boat into Venice and all around. So there you are. And it take a long time to sail your yacht based on the Hamble River round to Venice. You could do it, but
fascinating.
As compared to just driving there.
So
there you are.
Well, thanks very much, Roger, and really good to speak.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
I wish you fair winds and easy seas.